That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Second City Gridiron. Bill Zimmerman with you, and we are back for the first edition, so to speak, of our off-season podcast series. And again, these won't be weekly throughout the off season, but they will be pretty regularly. We're expecting to have some good guests coming up here in the next few months. You know, we're going to talk free agency. Courtney Cronin's scheduled to come on in a couple of weeks. Hopefully Brad Biggs will be coming on around free agency. And of course, we'll do our cast of characters for the draft preview, which will be interesting this year because, of course, the Chicago Bears are not picking in the top 10, which is something they've consistently been in the last 6 or 7 years or thereabouts. But I'm really excited about the guest today. It's the first time he's been on this podcast. That's going to be Dan Bernstein, of course, longtime Chicago media guy, has 312 Sports, has his podcast. Now, Dan Bernstein is going to be by in just a little bit. Plenty to do with Dan about the Chicago Bears, about the stadium. Also want to get his thoughts on Terry Boers, who, of course, passed away a couple of weeks ago. I didn't really know Terry personally. I knew him, kind of just through people a little bit, met him a couple times. I was at the Score. When I was there, it was mostly nights and weekends. It was a lot earlier in my career. So was not, I worked with Matt Abatacola and Jason Goff a lot, who were Boers and Bernstein's producers and also hosting on nights and weekends. I worked with them a lot, didn't work too much with Dan or with Terry. So interested to see, obviously, Dan's going to have a lot of great things to say about Terry. Want to get some of his thoughts and memories about Terry, and of course, plenty to get to with the Chicago Bears. So let's jump in here, and let's, of course, start with the Super Bowl. Of course, that played a handful of days ago. Seahawks and Patriots. This game was terrible. I mean, what was it? 9-0, whatever it was at the end of the third quarter before offense finally got going. But it was just not a compelling football game. You never had the idea, except maybe early when it was 3-0 or 6-0, that the Patriots were going to be able to get back on track, because the Patriots offense was inept. They had 78 yards of offense at the end of the third quarter. Now, you have to credit the Seahawks a lot for that performance. But you also have to look at Drake May, who was terrible. Now, May wasn't very good throughout this entire postseason, took a lot of sacks, didn't really look crisp, and he looked like a deer in headlights for a lot of that Super Bowl. And interestingly, the worst part about May's performance was the errant passes. That was the thing. Yes, the Seahawks pressured him. Yes, the Seahawks sacked him. At times, the Seahawks had the receivers covered very well, but there were opportunities to complete passes, and May was off by several yards at times on these. So I am not saying Drake May is a bad quarterback. I think I had Drake May 5th or 6th on my quarterback rankings that I did a couple weeks ago. I'm not changing that because of one bad game, even though, yes, it was on the biggest stage. Sam Darnold didn't look particularly great either, but this Seahawks team is an excellent team, especially the defensive side of the ball. Now, I saw some people with DVOA saying, oh, if you look at DVOA, this is, the third or fourth best team in NFL history. I think that is absolutely ridiculous. I cannot get behind that. Like, if you're going to look at the 60 champions we've had and just look at the Super Bowl era and, forget stuff before the Super Bowl era, that's fine. But in terms of how they dominated teams and everything, like I saw Kay Adams trying to put out something that the Seahawks are the best ever, the only team to allow, score more than 29 points, I think, and allow less than 16 points or something like that. But literally the Chicago Bears in 85 were at 28.8 and allowed way less points than the Seahawks. Now, I understand that's a different era, but we're cooking the books for the Seahawks. They are a worthy champion. They were the best team in the NFL. I know some of us wanted to make the case. We were clinging to the Chiefs. We were clinging to the Eagles for a while as the best team. If they were going to ever get going, obviously they didn't. Then it was kind of pivoted to the Rams. It was, well, if the 49ers were healthy, but they weren't healthy. It took a while for people to warm up to the Seahawks. I didn't think the Seahawks would be very good. Look, I try to admit always when I'm wrong, and I was wrong on the Seahawks. Not that I didn't like Mike McDonald. I thought that was a good hire, but I think in some sort of preview article or maybe on a podcast, I said that the Seahawks downgraded from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold. Now, that is just a beyond stupid comment, but that's how I felt in August. I don't think I was alone in that comment either. Geno is cooked, and Darnold is clearly a good quarterback, maybe a very good quarterback. I'm not calling Sam Darnold great, but that is okay. He doesn't have to be great when he has that kind of defense, and things are going to work out well for Seattle. They win the Super Bowl, and they should be consistently good. Now, defense is hard year over year to be consistently this good. We'll see, because they've got some really good pieces on that Seattle defense. But I do think you can look at it and say this Seahawks is a good team, but they are a middle of the road champion. I don't think they're an all-time great. They're not a team that clawed their way and you sit there and go, really? This was the champion this year? Like, for example, like the 88 49ers, you don't think is a bad champion, because in 89, they went back-to-back and won 55-10 the next year in the Super Bowl. So you sit there and say, oh, yeah, they barely beat the Bengals. Joe Montana marches them down, John Taylor's touchdown, 49ers win. But that was not a good 49ers team. I think they went 10-6. Like they just, they got to play the Bears, and the Bears had, no quarterback at the time. And Jerry Rice ran wild in that game. And bing, bang, boom, even though it was in Soldier Field, the 49ers advance to the Super Bowl. So, and that's not the only one. There's plenty of other champions where you sit there and go, they were okay. Like the Colts in, Super Bowl V? That team was rotten. That was Johnny Unitas was cooked. He didn't even make it through the game. Like, that was not a great Super Bowl champion. So there's plenty of teams we can say are worse than the Seahawks team. I'm not knocking the Seahawks team. I just don't think this was a uniquely special team. I thought the Seattle Seahawks team, the Legion of Boom team, is a better team. They have a better quarterback. They have a better running back. They had solid weapons. And I think the defense was better. If DVOA says it's not, fine. DVO can say that. I'm going to look at it with my eyes, and my eyes tell me that the Legion of Boom was a better team. So I look at this and say the Seattle Seahawks, great season, worthy champion, not an all-time great team. Now, what I do think is interesting with the Seahawks is you got to look at that as like a measuring stick for the Chicago Bears, because now this is the team to beat. And we have seen the Bears compete with the Rams and, just one bad interception in overtime away from beating the Rams. We've seen them beat the Packers. We've seen them beat the Eagles. We competitive with the 49ers in San Francisco. We have seen this team play with the best. Now, they didn't have to play against Seattle. They're going to have to do that next year. And this is going to be a good measuring stick, because the Bears, you think, are still going to be an offensive-oriented team. Seahawks are going to be a defensive-oriented team. And we'll see when they square off exactly how that's going to look. It's going to be a fascinating offseason for the Bears, how they tweak this roster. Got to figure Seattle's going to try and keep the guys they can keep and try and run this thing back next year. But when will that Seahawks matchup be? I think there's a strong chance, this is not information, I'm not reporting anything, I'm not even making a rumor, that the Seahawks and Bears are going to be the Thursday night kickoff game for NBC. Now, when we look at this, and I have the Seahawks, I have their 9 home opponents up there, and other people have done this, but I think it's worth talking about, right? They have 9 home opponents. Of those 9, the Arizona Cardinals, New York Giants are on that list. There's no way they are doing that. And the LA Chargers are not a sexy team. I cannot see them putting the Chargers on that Thursday night team. So that eliminates 3 right there. They're out. You look at the Patriots. You could sit there and say Super Bowl rematch. That would get their juices flowing, right? Like I said, that was a bad game. Does NBC and the NFL, do they want to put that back out there and back-to-back? I don't think so. I think that's a bad look after a bad Super Bowl. So let's put that one aside. The Kansas City Chiefs, that one makes a lot of sense, right? Oh, the Chiefs, the recovery, can they bounce back? Stardom, all this thing with the Chiefs. But the Chiefs, they have to decide this in May. They're not going to be certain that Patrick Mahomes is going to be ready to play week 1. And if they don't have Patrick Mahomes out there, I don't know, Gardner Minshew, I don't know who it's going to be quarterbacking the Chiefs if it's not Mahomes. That's not what they want. So I don't think they're putting Kansas City. I don't think they're putting New England. I don't think they're putting the Chargers. I don't think they're putting the Giants. LA and San Francisco, you say, well, those make a lot of sense. But LA and San Francisco, they've already been talking about that's going to be a week 1 or a week 0 game. They're going to play in Australia. So they're out. That leaves 2 teams, Dallas and the Bears. Dallas was in it last year, and Dallas just had a losing record. I can't see them going back to Dallas in back-to-back years when they've been mediocre. That leaves the Bears. I think the Bears are going to be in the Thursday night kickoff game. And I will talk about this more about in San Francisco. The Bears were buzzing in San Francisco. A lot of people wanted to talk about the Bears. NFL realizes that. I'll get into this more in a second. But the NFL loves the Chicago Bears. That's why I think it's funny when people are like, oh, the NFL is trying to screw the Bears, this and that and the other. No, they don't. They would love the Chicago Bears to be awesome every year because Chicago, in the NFL's mind, is the number 1 football market. And what I mean by that is they're the number 3 market in America, but number 1 is New York, and that's split with the Giants and the Jets. Yes, there's a lot more Giants fans than Jets fans, but the Jets do have a strong fan base in New York. So that's not the number 1 market because it's split with 2 teams. LA split with 2 teams, but LA is a Lakers town. They don't really care about the Rams that much. They like that they're good, but people aren't gravitating to the television to make sure they catch Rams games. The Bears, they love the Bears. The Bears are they're the charter franchise, still owned by the Hallis family. Now you've got a big-time coach. You've got a big-time quarterback. The Bears' schedule this year, mark my words, they are going to be all over the late starts, the 3:25 Chicago starts. They're going to be all over primetime. I'm predicting 6 games. The record is 7 by the Chiefs. They could do that. I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to be in primetime. Now, primetime, to me, includes games like the Black Friday game, Christmas games, Thanksgiving games, even if they are not in prime time. If they have like the Bears playing the Lions on, Thanksgiving, that's considered a primetime game to me. Those national games, I think they're going to be all over the place. NFL fans might get sick of the Chicago Bears, but they think the Bears are going to be good. Bears are a big brand. Bears have some stars. The Bears are going to be a big theme in 2026 for this schedule release. Because I'll tell you what, going down in San Francisco, the Bears were buzzing. People wanted to talk about the Bears. People who knew me as a Chicago person, brought it up hey, the Bears. I wish the Bears had made it further. I love watching this team. They're a lot of fun. A lot of people like talking about the Bears. They were coming up casually in conversation about a fun team, an interesting team, that kind of stuff. Obviously, that has not happened for years because the Bears mostly have stunk. If I wanted to talk Bears with some media people, I had to bring up the Bears. And what do you think of Justin Fields? What do you think of Matt Eberflus? What do is Matt Nagy any good? These are the questions that I had to ask and get, opinions on. That didn't have to happen this year. I could be a fly on the wall for an interesting conversation about the Chicago Bears because people were talking about the Bears a lot more in San Francisco, at the media center, and around San Francisco. I know, I put out a tweet about that. The Packers fans found it. And of course, he's lying. He made it up. All this stuff. The Packers fans, man, they are obsessed with the Bears right now. There is some rent-free property in Wisconsin that the Chicago Bears own, and it's everybody's head that's a Packers fan in Wisconsin. It's remarkable. I didn't tag the Packers. I didn't mention the Packers. I just said, hey, NFL media finds the Bears interesting, and they freaked out. You should go on my timeline at Bill T. Zimmerman. You can find the tweet. It's pretty funny. Go look at the quote tweets, especially. That's where the Packers fans went crazy. I want to talk about the Bears and kind of what's going on and what I heard in San Francisco. But before we do, let's get into some other things. The Drake May thing about how he performed, I think, is interesting with Caleb Williams because as the 1-2 guys in that draft, they're always going to be tied together. Just like Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf are always tied together. Just like any of these quarterbacks in the same class, doesn't matter if they're busts or all-time greats, they get tied together. People will always compare them. And with Jaden Daniels as the number 3, those 3 guys especially are always going to be compared. And yeah, Penix, and yeah, Nix, and yeah, JJ, and all this stuff. Like, there will be other guys talked about in that class, but it'll always be about those 3 quarterbacks at the top. And I think it's interesting. We have seen this general like wave of change in opinions. A year ago, everyone, Jaden Daniels, he's the best quarterback. Patriots, May looks good, but the Patriots could have taken Daniels. The Bears should have taken Daniels. Caleb Williams is a bust. We heard all the narratives. Then throughout this season, Jaden's getting hurt. People are starting going, Jaden may not have the body. A lot of us were saying that during the draft process, may not have the body to consistently be good at the NFL level. And should not be good, not to be healthy at the NFL level, because that's the biggest alarming thing. And I know I've said this on the podcast. Jaden keeps hurting different things. It'd be one thing if he had a nagging elbow and you're like, well, maybe some surgery or something can fix that. It'll be okay. But it's a rib, it's a knee, it's an elbow, it's a shoulder. Like, it's constantly something different. So that's concerning for Daniels. But throughout the season, May's an MVP candidate. May should have been the number 1 pick. May. Then the postseason happens. And yes, Caleb made postseason mistakes. Clearly, there were a couple interceptions. We don't need to get into all the details, but Caleb also made spectacular plays in the postseason. Drake May had a far more pedestrian performance. So now you see these polls coming out. Who should have been the number 1 pick of the 2024 draft? And Caleb Williams is atop most of those polls. That's what people think. It has swung now back to Caleb Williams. And I do think Caleb is prime for, I don't want to call it a breakout season, because I thought he was excellent this past year, but to really take a level up his game and push and establish himself as a top 10 quarterback in the league. I'm not saying we're going to call him a top 3, top 4 quarterback. We're not going to put him with Lamar, Burrow, Mahomes, and Allen yet at this point, but he is going to establish himself as a top 10 quarterback. I firmly believe that. So before we get into the rumors, I want to talk about the Ian Cunningham situation with the Falcons. And I think I have a very unpopular opinion, but I am going to talk about it anyway, because I think this opinion is worth sharing. Yes, it sucks that the Bears didn't get comp picks for Ian Cunningham. And it is, if you haven't heard, it is 100% out. Mike Florio has reported that the NFL has said no comp picks for the Chicago Bears. Now, weeks ago, we were talking about this when Cunningham was hired, and I was on Twitter arguing with people and saying they won't get comp picks. And they're like, this is all speculation. I said, no, it is not. This is how the rule works. The Bears will not get comp picks. Now, here's what I'm going to say overall, and this is where the unpopular opinion is going to be. Like I said, you should be annoyed the Bears didn't get comp picks. I am not trying to say this is the way it should be. This is great. But I do think the way the NFL has the rules set up is very smart. And I don't think they should change it on behalf of the Bears kind of getting screwed. I think this is the best way to do it because titles don't matter at the NFL level. And what I mean by that is the top football guy for the Chicago Bears is the general manager. But for other clubs, they have a president of football operations. Now, the title might be president of football operations and general manager, but that's the top football guy. Like the Patriots, for example, the Bengals, for example, director of player personnel is the top guy in football operations. So everybody has the same job. Like, for example, if Jeff King right now, I think Jeff King's about to be named the Bears assistant general manager. I think when the Bears announce their new coaching staff for 2026, I think they will also officially announce that Jeff King is going to be the Bears' new assistant general manager. He is currently their director of pro player personnel, and he is going to get that promotion. Now, I bring up Jeff King for the idea, like, let's say Elliott Wolf quits or gets fired, the Patriots head of football operations, but he's the director of player personnel. Same title as Jeff King. If Elliott Wolf left and Jeff King was hired, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, by title, Jeff King has the same job, director of player personnel. That's not it at all. He's going to go from the number 3 in the Bears to the number 1 in the Patriots office. So how this works, and there were people talking about the paperwork matters and this matters. None of it mattered. And that's what I was trying to stress on Twitter. This is how this rule works. Every team in the NFL gives a name to the league office and says, who is your primary football executive? For the Chicago Bears, it's Ryan Poles. Now, that's it. For the comp picks, for the 2 third-round picks, a team has to hire a new primary football executive. Doesn't matter if it's general manager, doesn't matter if it's custodial services. If the name is submitted to the NFL as primary football executive, that's the position that matters. So if that person leaves and a person of color is hired into that position, that team that he was previously on gets comp picks. That's how it works. I think that rule is smart because the ambiguousness of titles and everything that goes into it on how every team operates a little differently all gets eliminated. I think it's very smart. So for years, for example, I was screaming that Ted Phillips had no business evaluating football operations because he knows nothing about football. He was an accountant. He was terrible. He'd admit in press conferences he knows nothing. George McCaskey would admit he knows nothing. And yet they had to evaluate, Phil Emery and Ryan Pace's job performance. That's a terrible idea. Now, Kevin Warren is not a football guy, but Kevin Warren is far more involved in football operations with his long time with the Vikings, with his time running the Big Ten. He's got a far better grasp of football knowledge than Ted Phillips did. So for years, I said the Bears should hire a president of football operations. My guy that I always loved was Gary Fensick, because I thought Gary Fensick, he's a finance guy, made a ton of money after his career. He's a football guy. Like, he knows. So I was like, that's the kind of guy they should hire. We even heard rumors a few years ago that Trace Armstrong could be hired and be like the president of football operations. So the GM would have someone to report to. Now, had that happened, that person would have been the Bears' primary football executive. So if a person of color was hired to the Bears as general manager, like Ryan Poles was, for example, it wouldn't have mattered for the Kansas City Chiefs. But Ryan Poles is the primary football executive, so it does matter. So the Falcons brought in Matt Ryan because they had Rich McKay. Now, Rich McKay was a football guy. He was a longtime general manager of the Tampa Bay Bucks. He comes to the Falcons. He's their president and CEO. But he's a football guy, but he wasn't the primary football executive. Now, Rich McKay got a new job within Arthur Blank's organization. I don't remember, like the blank, I don't know what, doesn't matter. McKay got a new thing. They bring in a new president. That new president is really only a finance type guy. So Blank wants a football guy to look over football operations. That's where Matt Ryan enters. So Matt Ryan gets submitted to the league office as the primary football executive because the general manager reports to him. Now, this is definitely a promotion for Ian Cunningham. He's going to be running the Atlanta Falcons roster and their team. He is 100% doing that, but he still reports to Matt Ryan. So it doesn't matter if Matt Ryan shows up every day and plays Mario Kart. He's still the primary football executive. You can sit there and be annoyed with it, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I still think overall the way the rule is interpreted and the way it's set up by the league office, I think makes a lot of sense, and I like it. Very unpopular opinion to have in Chicago right now, but that's the way I look at it because it eliminates all the ambiguity and all the different ways teams operate. And it's just like, if you're not the primary football executive, you're not going to get comp picks. I don't think Arthur Blank, by the way, I've heard a lot. Oh, Arthur Blank wanted to screw the Bears. Arthur Blank wants to win football games. Arthur Blank is on the NFL's DEI committee of the owners. He was part of the reason this rule exists. He is not putting this rule in place and then purposely trying to screw the Bears. The Bears are not getting comp picks from the Falcons. Those comp picks would have been attached at the end of the third round. So it's not like the Falcons are losing picks if they hire Ian Cunningham. It didn't matter. Arthur Blank is not trying to screw the Chicago Bears. It's just the way he set up his football operations, and the Bears end up with the short end of the stick. So I don't have a problem with it. I shrug my shoulders. It's unfortunate. And for those of you that wanted Ryan Poles to block it because he wasn't getting draft picks, Ian Cunningham is from Atlanta. He's a Falcons fan growing up. This is a cool job for him to have. He's finally getting an opportunity to be a GM. It would be a real jerk move by Ryan Poles to try and block him. They've worked together for several years. They're friends. That would be a bad move over third-round picks. Can't do that. That is a bad look for them in the league. So when I look at it, I say it's unfortunate, but I also say I like the rule. And I think that's going to make me very unpopular with you guys as we look at this situation with the comp picks. Let me get to a couple more things here. Like I said, the rumors in San Francisco, I think was very popular for the Chicago Bears, very interesting, very positive in every way. Now, in terms of the roster, couple things I heard that I thought was interesting. One of them is DJ Moore. A lot of people think that DJ Moore, that the Bears do want to move him. I heard that from multiple people, but I also heard that the Bears have a DJ Moore problem because the contract is terrible for DJ Moore. Now, when I say this, I need you to understand what I am saying. When I say DJ Moore has no trade value, and that's what I was told in San Francisco, that does not mean that DJ Moore is a bad football player. DJ Moore is a very good football player. DJ Moore made several huge catches for the Chicago Bears. I am not saying he's bad. What that means is that DJ Moore's production is far less than his salary. The Bears cap hit on him right now is about $28.5 million a year. I think if he gets traded, it's $24 million for a new team. And you sit there and be like, well, $24 million is not bad. Top receivers are pushing $40 million a year. But $28 million makes DJ Moore like the 11th or 12th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. And $24 million drops him to like 16 or 17. And you can sit there and say DJ Moore is a top 20 wide receiver, and you may believe that, and that is fine to have that opinion. But by production, he is not. This is a guy that's averaged a little over 800 yards a season and 6 touchdowns the last 2 years. And I know what we saw in 2023. DJ and Justin Fields had a connection. DJ had massive stats. He was awesome. But that is not who he's been the last 2 years. Now, a team may think he could cut back to that, but they don't have to trade for 2023 DJ Moore. They get to trade for 2025 DJ Moore. In 2025, DJ Moore had, 650 yards or whatever it is. So the situation with the Chicago Bears is DJ Moore's contract is going to be very hard to move. I didn't think it was going to be as difficult when I was talking about a month or 2 months ago that I think DJ Moore could get traded this offseason. But I didn't think he'd get a lot. I think I got 5th round pick, something like that. But I said, like, a couple people that would know this kind of stuff told me that they believe, I'm not saying this is what it is, but they believe if DJ Moore is traded, it'd be one of those like 7th, 6th round pick swaps. Like the Bears would have to just dump him for nothing. So that puts the Bears in a difficult situation because they absolutely need salary cap space. They have plenty of guys they can restructure and open up salary cap space. But if you restructure DJ Moore, you convert money into a bonus. That bonus gets put throughout the body of the contract, right? It gets spread out. So if you convert, I think it's $23 million DJ Moore's salary. And I think he's on the hook for, I think, another 4 years. So let's say you convert $20 million of it to a bonus and you spread that out. It's $5 million a year. But DJ Moore's dead money for the following 4 years or the following 3 years after this year, that $5 million, that $15 million that's still left, that still stays on the books. So if the Bears convert a huge chunk of DJ's salary, then they are also saying that they want DJ to stay on this roster, not just for next year, because then they're going to get a much bigger cap hit than if they keep him like this. So I think it's an interesting situation for DJ Moore, but I do think what it comes down to is I think the Bears are stuck with him. Now, that's not a bad thing because, as I said, DJ Moore is a very talented football player. But at the same time, Luther Burden and Colston Loveland are 100% going to be ahead of him next year. Rome Odunze, despite missing games, was ahead of him in terms of targets this year. You cannot really pay your 4th target in an offense $28 million a year, especially when the Bears have to move money around in other places to fix other holes on the roster. I'm not sure what they're going to do. I think at a minimum, it's a restructure. I'm sure they're going to want to try and have DJ take a pay cut when they try and restructure this. I don't think DJ is going to want to, and I don't blame him. I am not you should, give back money and be a team player and all this stuff. If players want to do that, that's fine. But these guys have every right to go out and try and make every penny. The Bears offered him this contract, and I don't think DJ Moore should give him a penny back because that's how it works in the NFL. You already have a bunch of unguaranteed money anyway. I don't think I don't think Moore should give any of that money back. If they want to restructure it and give DJ a bunch of money now so his cap hit lowers over the next few years, that's up to Chicago. That may be what they end up doing. But I do think this is an interesting situation to watch moving forward because while I thought DJ Moore was going to get traded, and based on his salary, he absolutely should, I just don't know if a team is going to take on that kind of money. Now, some can, like the Tennessee Titans, if they say, we'll take DJ Moore off your hands, we need a target for Cam Ward. Cam's going to chuck him the ball 15 times a game. DJ will be thrilled. Something like that could happen. I just don't think they're going to get much back. And when I did ask someone who would know, well, the Bears could eat some of that money, convert it to a bonus, pay him, and then trade him, and the new team would get a much lower cap hit. The idea there was that the Bears would upgrade from like a 6th-round pick to like a 5th or a 4th-round pick, and no one's eaten like $20 million to try and get a better day 3 pick. If that would jump to a 2nd-round pick, yes, the Bears would absolutely do that. But that's really not the situation they're in with the DJ Moore contract. It's probably still going to be a day 3 pick. That's the way I understand it from the people I talk to. So an interesting situation with DJ Moore. The other thing, obviously, we got to talk about is the defensive situation with the Bears. From what I have heard, the Bears are definitely going to change things up on the defense. I've heard they may try and remove Edwards and Edmonds from the linebacker group, try and start over fresh there. I think the secondary, I think maybe Kevin Byard stays, maybe Jaquan Brisker doesn't, or they let Brisker test free agency, and if he's not getting what he wants, maybe he comes back. I don't think they're going to pay Brisker big dollars. I don't think they have to pay Byard big dollars. Nahshon Wright, I didn't hear anything on. I've heard previously the Bears want to keep him, but I also think a Pro Bowl level season is going to warrant a lot of money in the free agent market. And the Bears still have Tyreek Stevenson and still have Jalen Johnson. Are they going to get rid of Jalen Johnson? Are they going to say Tyreek Stevenson's no good, he's now a backup, and keep Nahshon Wright there? I don't know how that's going to work. I didn't really hear anything on the secondary, but I did hear that about the linebackers. What I heard is that the belief is the Chicago Bears are going to try and make massive changes and beef up the defensive line. It doesn't necessarily have to come from the edge. They may try and get a dominant interior defender as well. But I do think the Bears are going to be looking via the draft, via free agency, and via the trade market to beef up the defensive line. I've heard Dio Odengbo, they might try and do an injury settlement and get him off the roster. He's going to not play or be ineffective next year because of this injury. It's the last year of his guaranteed money. He's not seeing year 3 anyway. So can the Bears figure out a way to get some of that money off the roster for him? It's going to be interesting. Like Grady Jarrett, I didn't really hear much about that, but I did hear that the Bears were going to want to pay and, really try and beef up that defensive line, that they understand that that is a major weakness, and they're going to approach it like they did offensive line last season. Now, the big names out there, Trey Hendrickson, Maxx Crosby. Now, in terms of Trey Hendrickson, I did not hear, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but I did not hear anyone say the Bears are really in on Trey Hendrickson. A lot of people connected the dots, Dennis Allen, Trey Hendrickson, both with the Saints. So it's a possibility. And I'm sure if Trey Hendrickson is going to be looking for a new team, he's going to look at the Chicago Bears. I'm sure the Bears are going to look at him. I don't think the Bears can pay Montez Sweat and Trey Hendrickson that kind of money. Is someone going to be interested in Sweat? Sweat's production is, I think it wasn't quite what his money was, but a lot closer than what DJ Moore's production was from a wide receiver standpoint. Maybe they can move Sweat. I think that's going to be interesting. But the big question was Maxx Crosby. And yes, I did hear that the Chicago Bears are going to have interest in Maxx Crosby. But before you start doing backflips, and this was a joke going on around the media center, Maxx Crosby's been tied to 31 teams. Everybody thinks everyone's going for Maxx Crosby. So I think it's a little too early to get excited. But yes, Maxx Crosby has been mentioned as a possible Bears target. Now, the one thing I did hear, and this is from a Las Vegas-based person, that they believe that you can get out of paying second-round picks if you pay a player as well to the Raiders, and that maybe you could get like a first, third-round pick and a player for Maxx Crosby. Now, this Las Vegas person said that the player would have to be in a position of need, and yes, wide receiver is a position of need. But if you sit there and say, well, DJ Moore could be the player, and I've already told you that DJ Moore's trade value, because of the contract, is like 5th, 6th, 7th round level, mid to late day 3 level, well, then that's not going to impact the trade very much. You'd be, that's like almost like a throw-in and to get the salary off the roster. So the name I heard, and Bears fans are going to be upset, that if the Raiders and Bears made a deal, Darnell Wright would go to the Raiders. That's who the Raiders would be looking at to bring to Las Vegas. And it makes a ton of sense. If they're going to draft Mendoza, their offensive line stinks. You bring in Darnell Wright, you get a couple guys, you beef up that offensive line, and suddenly the Raiders' offense looks functional. Would the Bears do that and hurt their offensive line? I don't think so. So that may put them at a standstill, because a lot of people said that they don't expect the Bears to pay 2 first-round picks for Maxx Crosby. So will the Bears end up with Crosby? Right now, the answer has to be, I don't know, because it is way too early and there just were not enough, lines attached at this point. I think we'll hear more at the Combine. It'll be interesting about the Crosby rumors coming out at the Combine. I think we've probably covered enough. I think we want to get to Dan Bernstein. I could go on more about the stadium. I don't think I have that much interesting stuff to say at the stadium. I'd rather hear what Dan Bernstein has to say. The one thing I'm going to say to finish this monologue before we get to Dan, Coach of the Year for the NFL. Ben Johnson didn't win, and based on the records of the Jaguars, based on the Patriots, he shouldn't have won. That's fine. Kyle Shanahan, what he did with the 49ers with the injuries was incredible. But Ben Johnson got 1 vote. And here's what I'm going to say. Dan Pompei has been on Second City Gridiron. I don't think I've ever had him on this podcast, but he was a part of the 85 at 40. We did interview Dan Pompei for that podcast. Adam Rank has been on this podcast. Adam is a very nice guy, nice guy to hang out with. I like Adam. Adam and Dan both coming out and saying they're the guy that voted for Ben Johnson. Guys, why are we lying? One of you is lying. I'm guessing one of you is telling the truth, but one of you is lying. I'm not going to speculate who's lying, but I think it's ridiculous that one of you did. I don't know. I don't get it, but it's really okay. You don't have to come out and say you voted for Ben Johnson if you didn't. It's okay. Bears fans will be okay with it. I think everybody understands that Ben Johnson wasn't going to win Coach of the Year after the Bears lost the last 2 games of the regular season. It's okay, guys. We don't need to do this. All right. Dan Bernstein joins me next. This is Bill Zimmerman, Bears Banter. We'll be right back. Welcome back into the podcast. I'm really excited to do this guest. As you guys know, if you're long listeners of this podcast, a lot of Chicago media comes on this throughout the year. But this gentleman we've never had on, he is a Chicago sports media legend. He is Dan Bernstein. You can check him out at 312 Sports, both podcast form and on the YouTube page, Bernstein Unfiltered, Forward Progress. Of course, the Bulls won
Organizations win
championship. Sorry, brain cramp there. But Dan Bernstein joins me now. Dan, Bill Zimmerman, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Appreciate you jumping on. A lot of football I want to get to, but I would be remiss if I didn't start here. And that is, of course, the passing of the great Terry Boers. I've been a longtime listener of Chicago media. I remember Terry with the Heavy Fuel Crew before Boers and Bernstein. And, of course, you guys and the chemistry you had there for about 15, 18 years that you guys did the show together. Yep. It was the greatest show in Chicago radio history. I don't think anyone can argue that. The chemistry you guys had, the segments you did, who you crapping, it was a great show. So I just want to ask, obviously you knew him so well. What are your memories of Terry?
Thanks. They're almost obviously too numerous to mention. I think that in the aftermath of his death, I think so many people have pointed out just his kindness, his self-confidence in who he was, his giant heart, his immense sense of humor, and his lack of tolerance for fools and foolishness and injustice, and knowing how to point that out. I think importantly, a lesson we can learn is when he once said to me, and he more than once, he would say to me, he said, it's funny, we say the same things, but nobody beats me up over it. Everybody wants to kill you, everybody wants to hammer you. He said, but nobody bugs me, even though I say the same stuff you say. They all hate you. And I think his ability to tell people the truth while still making them laugh, his ability to tell people the truth while never making himself into a villain, was just a really special and remarkable talent in this day and age.
It really was. And I worked at the Score about 20 years ago. Now I was, mostly nights and weekends. So I was working with Matt and Jason when they were hosting, a lot more than I was working with you and Terry. But when I was there, I was just some 20 something, part-time producer. But when I was there, if Terry was there, it was just like, he didn't care who you were part of the Score family. He made you feel welcome. And he didn't know me from Adam. It was just, I feel like his personality and who he was a big core factor in what that community was for the people who worked at the Score.
I think that I'm probably a little too close to it. You probably have a better understanding of that than I do. If you want to go through all of the interns that we had and everyone, Terry just made he made choices to make his life easier by just not lying to anybody and being nice to everyone, and it made things less complicated for him. It's another great lesson.
Yeah, he really, really a great person, and someone who's truly, truly going to be missed. Not by the people that knew him, but the people who listened to him as
Both.
well. Would love to get some of your thoughts here on football and all, and obviously Super Bowl played less than a week ago. Would love to get your thoughts there, but kind of from a Bears perspective. On two things. One, where the Bears are compared to the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, that's the measuring stick. They are the champions. And I think, obviously, that defense is great. But I think the Bears, with some intelligent moves, with Caleb Williams' ceiling compared to who Sam Darnold is, and Sam's an American success story, but there is a limited ceiling there. I don't think there's much more growth for Sam personally. How do you feel that this Bears team, from what you saw this Seattle Seahawks team do throughout the postseason, can compete with Seattle and the other elite teams in the NFC coming up this season?
Oh, I don't want to overrate or I just want to make sure that we're properly looking at Seattle's performance. They were terrific. They were the best team this year. Every season is its own entity, and I don't presume Seattle will be as good as they are next year as they are this year. It's just very, very unlikely for a lot of reasons. And I don't think the Bears have a whole lot of improvement to do. My first thought after watching that Super Bowl was Bears could have won that Super Bowl. They probably wouldn't have. They probably would lose to Seattle. And I think if they played 10 times, Seattle would probably win 8. But there's nothing to say that Super Bowl couldn't have been one of the two. And that's really how I look at it. The Bears were good enough last year to have won the Super Bowl. Now, next year, it's going to be a different year. There's going to be different injuries. There's going to be different quarterbacks emerging. But they can score. And it's simply a matter of generating a pass rush and figuring out what they're doing with their defensive backfield. There's no way the Bears are going to have the takeaway ratio, the turnover ratio next year that they had this year. And that was one of the reasons we wanted them to take advantage of everything that was breaking their way. And things did break their way with the quarterbacks they were facing. They do have a difficult schedule, but they have the quarterback and they have the coach. Their record may not be as good next year, even if they are a better team. But if you're saying directly to the Seahawks standard, yeah, I don't really think it's all that much. If they're going to score the way they're going to score, I think they just have to be good enough defensively.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And one other kind of Super Bowl adjacent question, and that is the 2024 draft class with, of course, Drake May really struggling. And I'm not saying Seattle didn't make life difficult for him, but he had a lot of errant passes in that game. And I think a year ago, if you ask the masses in the media or, in the league or fans, who is the best quarterback from the 2024, everyone would have said Jaden Daniels. I think September to December, everyone would have said Drake May. And I've seen some polls and some conversation now that seems pretty comfortably that people think Caleb Williams is the best quarterback out of that whole class, but really out of that trio. Where are you with Caleb? Like, what is your confidence level in him? And, what kind of growth did you see from him throughout the year? Because I was absolutely thrilled with everything.
I saw a better understanding of how to play the position through Ben Johnson's eyes, because that is ultimately what he is being asked to do, is to see the game as his coach sees the game. I think everything you just said about people were saying this about that guy and people were saying this about that guy is every reason to not listen to short-term trends, because most of it statistically is just noise. And you prove that over 3 years, we're going to find out the quality of quarterbacks. And everything you say about Sam Darnold and where he's come from is yet another lesson to not look at small sample sizes, to have our opinions over a game or a quarter, but always understand where that is in the larger context of development at the most difficult and important individual position in sports. When you're talking about Jaden Daniels and how that specifically relates to Caleb Williams, look no further than the change they've made at offensive coordinator. Cliff Kingsbury is out in Washington, and a former Bears opponent recently, David Blau, the former Detroit backup, is in, and the reason being given is playing under center. That Washington made their offense easier for Jaden Daniels on the pro level by playing essentially his college offense. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that he was able to pick up the NFL in the way that he did, because they were making it easy for him. They dumbed it down for him. And I know that's a loaded term, but they simplified their offense to allow him to operate from the shotgun. Offenses that operate from under center are more successful because of what you can do with run fakes, because of how you can move safeties and linebackers. They know they need to do that now. And Ben Johnson didn't skip any steps. Ben Johnson, the moment he got his hands on Caleb Williams, said, you're going to operate more from under center. You've got to learn how to turn your back to the defense. You've got to learn how to snapshot things. You've got to learn the purpose and meaning of all of the fakes and the motions that we're going to use. And it takes longer for that to work. And we started to see that more near the end of the year.
Yeah, and that under center concept is so important. I don't remember who it was. It might have been Warren Sharp, but I saw something within the last few days that of teams that had the most offensive snaps under center, 8 out of the 10 top were playoff teams, and I think 12 out of the top 18 were playoff teams. So it was basically, if you're not under center, you're not winning.
You can't execute a real run fake in the shotgun. That's all it comes down to. It is something as simple as that. You cannot truly affect linebackers and safeties by simply pretending to hand the ball to somebody out of the shotgun. There has to be that turning of the back. There has to be that kind of full offensive movement, the timing, the choreography of everything from under center, based on where the line is going, based on everything you've laid out in protections, makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, 100%. I want to ask you about the stadium, and I want to ask you about the Ian Cunningham comp picks thing. But while we're talking about the team, let me ask you a little bit about this offseason, in terms of what the Bears need to do. Offensively, I think obviously they've got a few things to figure out. Obviously, left tackle with the Trapillo injury, and exactly, how they're going to restructure and work things on the offense. But I want to ask you about DJ Moore. And I think he's been the hot button topic, especially after the interception in overtime. A lot of people wanted to talk about maybe he wasn't running full effort, miscommunication. We've heard, we know all the things that have been going on there. But he's also the same guy that had critical big time catches for this Chicago Bears team. But I'm assuming Loveland, I'm assuming Burden, and I'm assuming Odunze are going to end up with more targets than him next year, the direction this offense is going. And I also think it's a situation where you really can't have a $28 million cap hit for your fourth offensive target. Where are you with DJ?
Well, the numbers are the numbers, and you're not going to be able to cut him. You might be able to trade him. I don't know who is going to want that, but it would be prohibitive at the moment to cut him. So
correct.
Unless somebody is going to make you an offer that at the moment I'm presuming he's going to be on the team. And I think this may just be taking the bitter with the sweet, that he is exactly what you say. That I think DJ Moore can be a star, and he can be a guy who you can count on to make huge plays at huge times, and he's going to drift on you every once in a while. There's going to be some inexplicable moments, but if that is just part of what you're getting, on balance, he's still more of a positive than a negative. And if that's the kind of problem you're sorting through here, that you're probably in a good place. I would say though, Luther Burden, if he isn't a star already, he's going to be. And I don't think there's any question that there are going to be more touches, there's going to be more snaps. And as long as he proves that he can block, as long as he proves that he is aware and that he can execute his blocking assignments, he has every opportunity to be a national level breakout player next year.
He really does. How would you handle the left tackle situation, assuming Trapillo isn't ready for most or all of the season, but knowing he may be back and you don't want to make a big investment there?
Well, as of right now, it's either Braxton Jones or it's Theo Benedict, waiting to see if another team is going to come offer on Braxton Jones. All of the rankings have him as a top 5 available tackle, and yet the Bears don't like him. And they had a terrible competition over there that nobody really won, that they ended up defaulting into. The fact that they had to move Joe Thuney out there for a critical game just shows you how significant the pass blocking at a minimum is out there. And especially watching how Will Campbell melted down in the Super Bowl.
It was incredible.
As horrendous as he was, and then he tells us he was hurt. I don't know if that guy's on the roster right now. I will tell you about Trapillo. That is a bad injury for a man that big. A ruptured patella tendon with the kind of stress that a body like that puts on it, there is no guarantee that he's ever going to be an effective NFL player, that he's ever going to be the same. It is potentially a career trajectory altering injury, so I'm not thinking about him at all. I don't know if the Bears starting left tackle for next year is here yet, and it remains possible until I'm told otherwise, considering what they're going to have to pay Darnell Wright, that even though this was another thing that they tried, Darnell Wright is potentially an elite player at right tackle. Would they want him to be something less than that and just be good at left and plug somebody else in at right? We will see with some of the moves that they make.
Now, I heard this from one person that maybe they would consider with the idea of bumping Thuney out there for the whole year. I don't love it, but it could. No. It's a lot easier to find a guard than it is a tackle.
No, I'm not doing that. I'm not bumping Thuney out there for the whole year, and that would be a huge ask of him at his age, at this stage of his career. The guy just won Protector of the Year at left, the best individual offensive lineman, the inaugural award.
Right.
And the general rule of thumb in the NFL is don't change 2 positions when you can change 1.
Right. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. What would your approach be here? I mean, they've got an interesting situation here. They've got Odengbo making money, and who knows if you can get anything from him next year. You didn't get anything really from him this year. Grady Jarrett contract didn't work out. Tremaine Edmonds is cuttable. Brisker's a free agent. Byard's a free agent. They could really change the face of this defense a lot if they choose to. How would you approach this defensive side of the ball?
I want to know about a couple injuries before I even dive in there. I want to know if TJ Edwards is coming back looking like his old self, because that sounded bad when they were describing the broken foot. And which Jalen Johnson is this? Because if this is late season post 2 injury Jalen Johnson, you got to think about cutting him. That also is a cap number where there is a spread in between the cap savings and the dead cap number of, I want to say, around $5 million. If he's what he was at the end of the year, you have a difficult time playing him. And I've got to know that he is coming back much closer to what we had seen pre-injuries, plural. That's the first thing. I'm going to wait to see what the market looks like for Nahshon Wright. I'm going to let somebody else probably set that market, because I think he's probably going to get overpaid for what he is. If he wants to come back, I wouldn't mind bringing him back, but I think last year was a likely outlier year for him. In between Byard and Brisker, generally you'd sign the younger player, but Byard overperformed for someone his age. He was one of the best in the league at his position. Do you pay an older guy in what might be a year of decline? There's risk there, but God, I got to improve that front four. I have to find, if I can't find a number one pass rusher, which they do not have, I look at Montez Sweat as a 2. I think he's good, but I don't think he's somebody you immediately have to game plan around because you're worried about him wrecking the game. I would love for him to be in that position where he isn't facing every double team every time. And that help can come from the interior or the edge.
Well, I got to ask you, the 2 popular edge guys that every Bears fan has been talking about is Trey Hendrickson, who now we're hearing a rumble of maybe the Bengals will franchise tag him with the idea of trading him so they can get some sort of trade. I don't think it's going to be a ton, but second, third round pick maybe to get Trey Hendrickson. And then, of course, Maxx Crosby, which it's a prohibitive cost. I don't know if the Bears would be willing to pay it, but obviously an elite talent there as well. Would you like to see the Bears try and make a big splash for someone like Crosby or Hendrickson?
I generally would rather not. I don't like spending money on guys in their 30s, or mortgaging the critical future of draft picks for somebody who could twist his ankle in the second week and be out the remainder of the year. I would much rather they build, if they think Austin Booker is a full-time player, you've got to love the height, weight, speed numbers on him. You have to hope that he is ascending. And you mentioned that they've already paid Odengbo. It may just be the value that you're going to get is at tackle and not as one of those popular big name edge guys. That sounds like a big ticket, and I don't want to give up necessarily multiple first round picks because they're just too damn valuable.
All right. Well, speaking of draft picks being valuable, let me ask you about the Ian Cunningham situation, because, this has been a hot button topic across social media for weeks about this draft compensation. I don't think Arthur Blank was out to screw the Bears. Arthur Blank's on the DEI committee. He's one of the guys behind this compensation rule. So I don't think there's any nefarious play there. I actually like the way the rule is set up, that, there's a primary football executive, so you don't get titles in the way, because sometimes it's a president of football operations. Sometimes it's a GM. The Patriots, it's director of player personnel. So titles don't really matter. I think this is a way to make it straightforward. I know that's an unpopular opinion. The Bears get screwed. Yes, the Bears got screwed because Ian Cunningham is that team's general manager. He definitely got promoted from where he was in Chicago. But at the same time, I do think the NFL rule is better than it is bad. I think it's an unfortunate situation for the Bears. What do you think?
Well, I would love for them to be able to say, hey, I know you looked at this now and have ruled on this now, but especially based on the ensuing comments that were made by Matt Ryan saying, I don't really know about this. I don't really know about that. He's running all the football stuff. Right. At least be able to go to the NFL and say, hey, let's give it a year. And then tell me by the way they actually work and what we know, then decide, where instead of ruling right now, instead of saying yes, no, and that's it, give it a chance to play out and then say who really is the football decision maker. And they can't do that. But I would like to have more time for them to have evidence of who is, because I'm pretty sure that for the most part, at least this year, it's going to be Ian Cunningham. I don't know if there's a way to split the baby and say, well, we're not sure. We're going to give you 1 third-round pick instead of 2. I would love it if it isn't necessarily binary, that there is a way of being fair about the value you should receive for what we both agree is an obvious promotion.
Yeah, it's very straightforward. I agree with you there. It's just a weird situation, an unfortunate one for the Bears. I know we've just got a couple minutes left, so I want to make sure I ask you about the stadium, because I think you're one of the guys that really kind of understands, how these things work and what goes into this. And, for me, I want a retractable roof stadium on the lakefront in Chicago where the Bears can still play in the elements, but they can close it up and have Super Bowls and Final Fours. That's not on the table. So I know it's Arlington Heights. This Indiana thing's been wild. They seem to be trying to give the Bears an offer they can't refuse, but now we're starting to see a surge back to Arlington Heights. Where have you been kind of throughout this entire process, and where do you think this ends up?
Well, I've been in a couple positions. One, as a fan, I don't care. I don't care where they are. I don't go to games. To me, a stadium is a giant television studio. And I don't care where your television studio is. And you can put it in Wisconsin. You could still call them the Chicago Bears. I'm still going to be a fan of the Chicago Bears. It makes no never mind to me. I like watching football that's played indoors more than football that's played outdoors. I think it's more fair to the great athletes. I don't need snow games. I don't need the novelty. To me, that's like playing basketball outside, and it doesn't make any sense. So a dome, at least a retractable at the very least, would be important to me. But I'm thinking more as a taxpayer. And as a taxpayer, I'm not here. All of these stadium deals that involve public money are bad for the taxpayer. Period. Paragraph. Everything else is a lie. All the data is a lie. Everything else is commissioned by so-called economic consultants, and it's all always bullshit. The states, cities, governments, taxpayers should not be in the business of building stadiums for billionaires to make the billionaires richer. And the billionaires would love to socialize the cost and privatize the profits. And that is how it has worked. It should never have worked this way, but that's where we live with other governments deciding that rather than help people, they want to help billionaires. I have nothing to do with that. If Illinois says we can build some roads that make people's lives easier as part of this, that's fine. That's what government's supposed to do. You want to help with infrastructure? You want exit ramps, stoplights, whatever else you need to improve people's lives around there, go ahead and do it. Do not pad the pockets of billionaires under the name of some football team. It's silly.
I agree with that 100%. Well, there he is, Dan Bernstein, 312 Sports. You can check out all the podcasts there. Bernstein Unfiltered, Forward Progress, and Organizations Win Championships. Dan's thoughts on general and on the Bears, and of course on the Bulls. Dan, thanks for so much time. Really enjoyed that conversation with you, and best of luck in the future.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
All right, there he is, Dan Bernstein, everybody. First time he was on this podcast. I enjoyed that conversation. He had a lot of interesting things to say. Always not everything I agree with, but that's okay. That's why we provide you with multiple opinions on here. But, Dan's a very smart guy, and he's usually right a lot more often than he's wrong. So I think a very interesting conversation there. So let's wrap it up with the mailbag and let's get out of here. And we'll see you again probably in a couple of weeks because I'm going on vacation next week. Let's start with Jason Black. Hi, Bill. Is it impossible to get out of the Dio and Grady contracts? Do we just have to suck it up with those? Actually, Jason, I think the Bears can get out of those if they want. I have heard the Bears are going to try and do some kind of injury settlement with Odengbo because he may not be able to play much or if at all this year. So I think the bottom line there is I think they're going to try and get out of Odengbo because I think they can basically say you're not going to see year 3 of this contract, and can they come up with some kind of settlement where maybe he doesn't see all the money, but, he sees a good chunk of it and they can send him on his way. So I've heard they're going to try and do that with Odengbo. The Jarrett thing is interesting because, if they cut him, it is a massive, massive cap hit. But if they trade him, the cap hit isn't bad. Like, I think it's if they trade Grady Jarrett, I think the salary for the incoming team is $10 million. Now, a team with a veteran with Jarrett's background, $10 million a year is not a bad contract for Grady Jarrett. And I think the Bears would have $8 million dead. And then I think if they post June 1st, the trade, then that $8 million spreads out to 4 and 4, I believe, over the next 2 years. I'm not great with salary. Where's Brad Spielberger when you need him? But that's how the way I understand Jarrett. So if they can find a trade partner for Jarrett, they get out Jarrett. I've heard they're going to try and do an injury settlement with Odengbo. We'll see if that happens. So I do think, Jason, there's a chance one or both of those guys will not be on the roster next year. But the Bears may sit there and say, we think Grady Jarrett as a veteran leader, we think he's going to bounce back. He was hurt a lot last year and playing through injuries. We think Grady Jarrett's going to have a better 2026. They may keep him. We will have to see. Adam Allgood. Can Poles sit out and let Ben do it again? He's talking about the offseason. Trust me, Adam. If Ben Johnson doesn't want a player, or if Dennis Allen doesn't want a player, they're not coming here. Ryan Poles is going to work with them. And like I said, I don't know, the split of the pie, if it's 51-49 or if it's 70-30, but this is Ben Johnson's Chicago Bears organization from football operations. Even if it isn't by title, he is running things. RTP, other than DL, what are their needs right now? In your opinion, do they splurge this offseason to get them over the hump? So, Pete, they can't splurge per se, because yes, they can free up a lot of cap space and they can make some free agent signings. I do think they're going to try and get an impact defender because I think they think that's missing, and you just don't know how good Jalen Johnson's going to be at this point. I think look, I'm not saying Jalen Johnson's terrible, but can Jalen Johnson be a top 5 corner in the league still? I think that's a fair question. This is a guy who's been banged up a decent amount. We knew that with the shoulder issues he had in college, that this is a guy who probably was going to have a shorter career and probably was going to fall off by the time he's 30. Now, he battled to get back, and he was not himself towards the end of the postseason, and he may be closer to himself this year. He may not be. So I don't think you can rely on Jalen Johnson to be that shutdown corner, a good corner, sure, but I don't think you can rely on him to be a shutdown corner. Like I said before, I think the Bears are going to invest a lot of money into this defensive line. So I do think the Bears are going to do that. Now, what are their needs? They need to decide left tackle, but I think they're going to try and do that on the cheap. They need to decide if Swift is their guy at running back or if they're going to tweak things there. They need to decide if they're going to keep DJ Moore around. That's what they need to decide on offense. And Pete, while technically linebacker isn't a need, I think it's going to become a need because I don't think they want to spend that kind of money at linebacker. I think you can bring DeMarco Jackson back as your second linebacker, assuming your base is nickel. Maybe, Ruben Hippolyte can be your Sam, your third linebacker at that point next year. I don't know. I told you in the draft, 10 months ago, didn't love the Hippolyte thing, but, I think you're going to see some change at linebacker. I wouldn't be surprised to see a new safety as well. I think they keep Byard, but I question if they're going to keep Jaquan Brisker. Susnick, what are you hearing about the consensus is on Trey Hendrickson? League is focused on Crosby, but there's a Dennis Allen tie and the Bears would not cost draft capital to acquire. Like I said at the beginning, haven't heard anything officially that the Bears are in on Hendrickson. Just a lot of people connecting the dots with Dennis Allen like you did as well. I think there's absolutely a possibility where Trey Hendrickson is a part of this team next season, but what are you going to do with Montez Sweat? Are you going to restructure? Are you going to trade him? Because what are you going to have to pay Hendrickson? $35 million a year? Spending $60 million a year on two edges, especially with Odengbo's $16-17 million sitting there right now too. Like the Bears have to fiddle with some things here. So Susnick, I can't say for sure anything on Trey Hendrickson, but I have heard DL's the focus. And if DL's the focus, the Bears are absolutely going to look at Crosby and Hendrickson. But I've also heard that the Bengals may put the franchise tag on Hendrickson once again and be looking to move him for a draft pick. So it may not just be that Hendrickson just signs for free. They may tag him and then try and trade him. So you may have to give up. They're not going to keep him. So it's not like they can ask for a first round pick, but you might be able to get a second or a third round pick because people need edges. So they might just do that. Adrian, will the Bears shift their strategy on acquisition of defensive personnel? Dio and Grady Jarrett signings look like a bad return. They need to look at pass rush win rate and chase proven production. Well, Adrian, Dennis Allen, I love Dennis Allen, but if we're going to be honest and we look at Dennis Allen's guys that he's picked over the defensive line in the past with New Orleans, it hasn't been great. So it's going to be interesting how they approach that. I think that's a fair question. How are they going to look at this? Is it going to be overly analytical? Is it going to be pass production? I think we're going to see them draft a couple guys. Obviously, they got Shamar Turner that they're going to hope is going to be more of an impactful player. You still got another year of Dexter. I think there's no chance Andrew Billings is back. So what is this going to look like? Is Grady Jarrett going to be back? How many guys do they need to add to the defensive line? You're going to have, what do we know right now? We're going to have Sweat. If they don't trade him, because they're not going to cut Montez Sweat, he's too good. They don't trade Sweat. You've got Sweat. You've got Javon Dexter. You've got Austin Booker. Can you guarantee anyone else is going to be back right now? That's just three guys. So if that's the case, they need at least three guys. Probably a first-round pick, if not a first-round pick, a second-round pick invested into the defensive line. Probably a day 3 pick invested into the defensive line. Probably 2 free agents, or trade. One high level, one mid-level guy. Probably going to see a lot of change, but how will the Bears look at it, in terms of who they're signing? That I don't know. I haven't been in the room with Dennis Allen and Ryan Poles. Betsy Tarr, since Ozzie is essentially going to miss the entire season, do you think we'll draft a left tackle? I would prefer they not, as we need all our picks for D, and hopefully Ozzie will return. Betsy, and I wrote a column about this. I didn't really talk about it in the opening segment because I was way too long with that. I think we went 35 minutes. I thought I was going to go about 20 to 25. Oops. I guess I like to hear myself talk. I think they're going to try and do left tackle on the cheap. Because I still think they have to see if Ozzie Trapillo, look, the way I've heard, this knee injury can be bad. Like Trapillo may never fully recover. Like it's a bad injury. So I think the Bears should just assume Trapillo's out next year. And if he comes back in November or December, great. But I think they should assume they're not going to get anything from him next year. Based on the playoff move, moving Tooney outside, they are not going to look at Theo Benedict as the left tackle. They could sign Braxton Jones on the cheap. Because if they're going to keep Benedict, which they did with the signing, Benedict needs to move inside. He needs to be a guard. So if they're going to move Benedict inside, I think that's a smart move. Could Braxton Jones be your swing tackle? I haven't heard one person mention Karan Amagaji's name in months. Like, he is not on the radar. I assume he'll be part of the 90-man roster next year, because why not? Maybe he figures things out. But I think we should assume nothing for Amagaji. I think we should assume Trapillo's going to miss the year, and that Benedict's moving inside. So if that's the case, they have no tackles on the roster other than Darnell Wright. Braxton Jones, maybe sign him for $3 million. Maybe he's your swing tackle. You could have him compete for the starting job, because I don't think Braxton Jones is going to get much of an offer based on what happened to him this last season. The other thing I have heard is Joe Tooney bumping out to left tackle for the season. I have heard it's a lot easier to find a guard to replace than a tackle. You've got Tooney on the roster. They might have to be like, Joe, you're going to have to be a team player and play tackle. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I don't think the Bears are going to invest in a left tackle really at all, Betsy. I think they're going to try and maneuver and figure things out. We've got JT Barzak. If you're doing your Bears mock-off season leading into the draft, who is cut, restructured, traded, or extended, I would not touch the Jarrett, Dio, or DJ contracts, because I think there's a good chance none are Bears in 2027. JT, I'm going to just say it's too early for me to do a mock-off season. We'll probably do one closer to free agency. I expect to have people on that can talk about free agency and the draft. We'll do that with them as well. I think overall, though, with the 3 names you bring up, I think I agree in terms of pushing money down the road. I think that may happen with DJ for the points I laid out in the opening segment, that I don't know if they're going to be able to find a suitor if they want to trade him to take on that contract. We will see. Dio, I think injury settlement, they're going to try and do that. If not, we will see, because you can't expect anything for him. And you are right. Dio has like no guaranteed money in 2027. He's not going to be on the roster. So I think that's that. And Jarrett, I would tend to agree with you, unless the Bears really think that he was simply injured. And that's not an issue, that Jarrett will be better in 2026, because he was banged up for like 2 months. He was dealing with a knee. He was barely practicing. Again, he's at the age where that certainly could happen again. There's no guarantee that's going to work out well for them. But I think bottom line here is we're going to see massive overhaul on the defensive line. Again, Dexter's cheap, so you're going to keep Dexter. Booker's cheap. You're going to keep Booker, and they should, obviously. Montez Sweat is productive enough to keep, but not if you want to invest more money. Maybe you restructure that deal and push some money down the road. That I could see happening, because he's not wildly expensive. Like $25 million restructured a little bit, get him in the upper teens. That's not a bad deal for Montez Sweat and his production, especially if he's your second best defensive lineman. Then he becomes really valuable. So I would agree with you, JT, not to touch those contracts. I don't think they're going to do it with Jarrett, but I think they could trade him if they find a partner. Like I said, I think it's $10 million or $11 million for an incoming team. That's not a bad Grady Jarrett number. Odengbo, see if they can get him off the roster for this season. And DJ Moore, like I said, that is going to be an interesting situation this off season. All right. That's going to do it for Bears Banter. We will not be back this upcoming week. I think that, and most of you, this came out on Friday. So if you're listening to this on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're not going to have another podcast for this week. But I'm hoping to have one for the following week. I'm hoping that's going to be Courtney Cronin. I've got to touch base with her. She was supposed to come on before the Super Bowl. Our schedules didn't end up working out. Then I went out to San Francisco. And I had stuff going on. I don't know if it was vacation. I don't remember what it was. She had stuff going on this week. So we move, and then I'm on vacation next week. So again, like your paths don't work out. And then suddenly 3 weeks in a row, things don't work out. So I think Courtney Cronin's going to be the next guest. We will see. And like I said, hoping for Brad Biggs, hoping for some other people throughout this off season. Just have to work on coordinating that with those people. But that's going to do it for this Bears Banter. We will talk to you again soon. Bear down, everybody. Adios.